Welcome to Workify's webinar series, where we examine various employee engagement and other emerging topics related to the workforce. My name is Steven Huerta, and I'm the co-founder of Workify, an all-in-one employee engagement measurement platform. Today, we've got an amazing topic and guests lined up. That companies should consider when developing their programs. Our agenda will cover how employee engagement space evolves and what trends are happening in the employee engagement world. Two, we'll cover challenges and opportunities that you may face implementing new engagement programs. We'll also reflect on best practices and lessons learned in implementing new programs, and then we'll wrap up with some final takeaways. With that said, today we have Dom Boon with us, VP of People with Liberty Latin America. Dom has 20 years of experience in HR and consulting. He's worked in various industries and sectors and currently supports 7,000 employees across Latin America, the Caribbean, for a telecom and technology company. Welcome, Dom.
Thank you, Stephen. It's great to be here. Great to join you today.
Do you mind sharing a little more about yourself and about how your role touches employee engagement?
Yeah, sure. So as you say, I'm VP of People for Liberty Latin America, the business unit within that organization. We're present in over 40 markets across this region, and I have a generalist role. So I work in recruitment, talent, organization design, change management, our leadership team to continue to grow revenue and build our business and contribute to the communities across the region as well.
Great. 40 markets. I can only imagine the great stories you have. Can you tell us a little bit about why you're passionate about employee engagement?
Yeah, I think employee engagement's always been an area of great interest for me. Ever since I was a student in HR, there's a great case study from Sears who found, a good 20 years ago, that the stores that they had with the most engaged employees delivered the best sales results. And that's always fascinating me. How do you measure this very intangible area of business operations and try to focus on continuous improvement and getting more productivity from your people? So yeah, I've always been fascinated in it, how you can influence it, how you measure it, how you improve the people experience in your organization.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's get started with today's session. Our first segment today will delve into the field of employee engagement and how it continues to evolve. Dom, with over 20 years of experience in human resources, I suspect you've seen a lot of change. What would you say are the biggest differences today as it relates to employee engagement from when you started your career?
I think that when I first started, employee engagement was a relatively new concept. Very much flavor of the month, the emerging trend in human resource profession. There were few engagement providers out there on the market, and most companies were probably starting out in the whole field of employee engagement, not quite understanding it. And if they were doing a survey, they would definitely only do it once a year, and that was a fairly cumbersome, long-winded process. Fast forward 20 years now, there's a lot of engagement providers out there in the market, some really great ones. And, I think as technology evolves, there's a demand from organizations to have better use of technology, more frequent touch points with their employees, and more frequent and detailed insight into how their employees are feeling about the experience of their company.
And from an executive and kind of strategic HR perspective, we see a lot of change happening, and just the nature of the conversation obviously is becoming more strategic. I'm just curious, throughout your career, how you've seen that conversation evolve with the CEO and the executive leadership teams that you've worked with. Has this become more important?
Yes, it has. Yeah, if I think back to the early days of my career, we had to really fight to get this topic on the agenda in leadership team meetings, and explain why it was important and justify it almost. And nowadays, it's my CEO asking me when she's going to get the latest engagement results, and asking me what the heartbeat and the mood is across the organization, and expecting me to have that data and insight available at all times for her. So, it's definitely become an established part of business life. The more progressive companies give this real serious focus and attention.
And as far as the obviously we're biased, we're in the software space. How have you seen the tool set evolve? And we're in the midst of a shift in what we like to call the HCM 1.0 architecture, and things are moving into a newer mode that's more employee engagement focused in terms of technology usage and human resources. How have you seen that change, and I guess what benefits have you received out of this change and evolution?
I can recall paper-based surveys a long time ago. Now everything is automated, and you've got the best survey providers out there giving you a regular update on your response rate. I think that the more progressive organizations out there are experimenting with different techniques of how you get people to fill out the survey and to take it seriously. I've worked in organizations, cable TV organizations that will bring the engineers into the depot at the end of a shift and, give them pizza and beer and get them to fill out the survey whilst they're relaxing after a hard shift out there in the field. So, there are lots of progressive technologies now out there as well. Everything is driven by mobile and the handset. Whether it's the communication about the survey or the people running the survey being able to see the results and understand them, or whether it's actually the respondents being able to use the mobile apps to complete the survey. So, yeah, I think we've seen a lot of a big evolution. The other area I'd say, Stephen, that's interesting is at one stage in this field, HR professionals referred to engagement, the concept of engagement, as being a single concept. Different survey providers out there have different methodologies for how you measure this concept of engagement. So I think as the HR profession has become more data literate, more numerical, and analytical, I think we're realizing that you really have to focus on evidence-based outcomes and make sure that you're understanding engagement in a very detailed way. A person can fill out an engagement survey one day and feel a particular way, and then a few weeks later they may have a negative experience at work, and it can make them feel very different. So I have to be very careful around what we mean by the term engagement.
Yeah, that's interesting, and we hear that a lot, that in the older days that HR departments and just companies in general were forced to make decisions based on a sense of what engagement looked like, and many times it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall. You get a 50% hit rate at best in terms of programs you implement and the outcomes that you expect, and the ability to really focus on data-driven decisions and data-driven action is certainly, I think, a huge benefit in today's world. So, we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I know you have some experience in implementing some of those solutions. But first, as the world has evolved and there's both good and bad with improved processes and more visibility to the executive team and a better tool set. What are some of the pitfalls and challenges or opportunities that you've had to work through that may not be obvious to companies that are kind of early in the process of building out an engagement program? Are there any things that come to mind in terms of challenges you've experienced that you would like to share?
Yeah, probably 2 or 3, Stephen. So, first of all, I'd say that, how do you get people to the request for them to fill out the survey? And, you've got to have a good communications campaign. You've got to have it endorsed by the senior leadership. You've got to understand that some people may not be sat in front of a computer every day, and you've got to make special arrangements to get their feedback. So you've got to think it through really and plan it effectively before you start. I've seen some organizations experiment with giving a bonus to managers who have a good response rate. I think you have to be a little bit careful around that so you drive the right behaviors. It's best to get endorsement from the CEO, from the most senior person in the organization, and a guarantee that the survey is going to be anonymous, and a guarantee from the CEO at the start that we're going to take the results seriously and try to act on them. I think the second area is when organizations change employee engagement survey provider. I've been through that experience myself. And if a particular way of calculating engagement has been well established and embedded in an organization, if you change the methodology, it's almost like changing how you measure temperature from centigrade to Fahrenheit. You've got to kind of reset the expectation around what a good score looks like when you've got a survey that's become established. So explaining how engagement is measured is pretty critical too. And then the third area I'd really pick up is this tendency for leadership teams in particular to want to dissect the detail of the results in 100 different ways. And, yes, it might be interesting to see what a telecoms engineer in a remote part of the organization with more than 5 years experience, it might be interesting to cut up the data into that level of detail. But the problem is, if you are waiting and sitting on the results and haven't shared them with your employees, the employees tend to feel that you've forgotten about the results or forgotten about the survey, or you're unwilling to share what has been expressed in that survey. So for me, you've got to be as quick as you can in getting the results out and to do it in as transparent a manner as you possibly can.
All excellent examples. Just zeroing in on the first item you shared, I'm just curious, Dom, I know that getting senior stakeholder CEO buy-in, we absolutely agree. That's critical part of the process. Do you have any advice on, anyone out there that may not quite be there yet, and how to get that buy-in at the most senior levels of the organization and really get their sponsorship in being an advocate in the engagement survey process? Any tips, ideas to share there?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's enough statistical evidence out there in the research field that provides evidence and certainty that more engaged employees deliver better results. I think also that CEOs need to know how people in all different areas of the business are feeling. So, sharing with CEOs and leadership teams the problems or the negative feedback that we've got out in the organization, and getting them to be sufficiently concerned that they want to know more about it, is an effective way of doing it. So other leaders spend a lot of time on engagement and communicating effectively, making sure their people are enjoying the work that they do, and getting them on board and helping getting their support to influence the CEO as well, I think is is critical. Just expanding a little bit on that point. I mean, one reservation I've heard from leadership teams and CEOs is, you know what, we're going through the middle of a restructure, we're going to get really bad results, it's the wrong time to send out the engagement survey request.
You've heard that before.
I've heard it, I've heard it several times, and my answer always is, forget that. There's never a good time, there's never a bad time. It's more important to keep up a regular drumbeat of surveys so that people have faith in the fact that you want to know what's going on and how they're feeling. So I always push back on that whenever I hear that feedback. And as a result, especially if you're in the middle of a transformational change that affects people, you get some really interesting insight around how people are responding to that change and how you can improve the way you're handling it.
Yeah, we've seen the same, Dom. We've seen a lot of leadership teams that are very hesitant and in making the decision to push forward, even though there's change going on. And we often speak with them and explain that the discipline and continuing with the process is key. But not only that, a lot of times executives can be disappointed with the inability to kind of compare your results and see change. And the irony is, when you're going through organizational transition, that's a perfect time to see where you may be from an engagement standpoint, where scores may not be exactly where you want them to be, and then come back 6, 9, 12 months later and compare your results, post-transition, post-transformation, and see some results. And so we do feel that it can be a huge missed opportunity, but the discipline does need to be there. So great. Well, just being conscious of time.
Stephen, I was going to say an extra example there. You might also find some pleasant surprises. One particular example I can recall from a couple of years ago, we were offshoring some back office activities to an outsourced partner in India. The transformational project was managed so well by the leader of that area. They got their employees so involved in the process, they gave them so much lead time before the change actually impacted the roles of the team, that we saw an increase in engagement in the survey. That just showed how important it is to manage these types of projects with people at the front and center of what you do, and was a very pleasant surprise.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. Moving on to the next section, this is my favorite, and this really is opening up the discussion forum for you to share best practices that you've been involved with. I know that you've obviously we've known each other for quite some time, and I know that there are a lot of great things that you've done in your career, and I would love for you to share, Dom, some of the best practices that you're most proud of, some of the kind of cutting edge things that you've done at not only Liberty Latin America, but some of the other companies you've worked for. So I'm going to now open it up for you to share some best practices.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think I was lucky enough to work for the Virgin group of companies for a good 8 years. First of all, back in the UK in the health club sector, the leisure sector for Virgin Active, and then after that for Virgin Media, TV and technology and telecoms organization. And when I was at Virgin Active, we experimented with something called the Oomphometer. Now, the Oomphometer was a tool that we had on our intranet. It was like a temperature, a thermometer, and people would go onto the intranet and they'd be asked, hey, how are you feeling today? Score it out of 0 to 10, how you're feeling. And people could do this as many times as they wanted to. Every time they visited the intranet, they'd be reminded to do it. And if someone scored lower than a 3, an extra box would pop up and it would say, oh, sorry to hear you're feeling a bit low. Why are you feeling low? And people could put in the box, exactly why they were feeling a bit disengaged on that day. And sometimes it would be trivial things like because it's raining or because I've split up with my boyfriend or whatever it was. But other times it was, I don't have the tools to do my job, or I haven't had training on this particular element of the job, or even, we've got a really unpleasant, difficult line manager in this health club, and we think you need to do something about it. When people filled out that box, it immediately was sent to the email account of our COO and of me, my inbox, and I was the HR director for the UK at the time. And so we get to see all of these comments on a very real-time basis. So I think that was something that was quite innovative. It gave us huge amounts of insight. On reflection, probably too much insight. I think one of the golden rules here, I mentioned it earlier, is about speed. Getting results back to people, showing a visible response to the feedback that they've given. So there was so much in there that we found it quite hard to show that we were visibly taking action. But it certainly gave us some incredibly useful insight that we did act on, and we used to drive engagement.
That should have had a powerful effect with your employees, just knowing that they had a direct line into the director of HR and the COO. So the two of you were receiving all of these messages, all of the feedback submitted by the employees. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, every single verbatim comment. So every time someone was scoring lower than a 3, they would write their comments, and we get it. And when you just got one comment that was negative from one of our 120 odd health clubs, you tended to not dwell on it too much. But when you saw a pattern of 10, 15, 20 comments that seems to have been written by different people, you realize you needed to act.
And did you guys have any kind of ER, employee relations related things? Were there any challenges from that standpoint in terms of the nature of some of the things that were being submitted, or were they all pretty straightforward?
Yeah. No. I mean, you had things such as payroll errors that we were able to work through. But like I said, we also had some serious managerial issues, and we changed managers as a result of some of the feedback that we received. So some really important stuff came through.
Excellent. What else?
Well, I mean, I think we've tried with you guys to do some extra analysis on various issues that we've got in our workplace to understand them in a more holistic sense. I'm very proud of the work we've done on vacations. So here in this region, if somebody doesn't take their vacation in a particular time frame, it remains on their personnel file, and it becomes an accrual on the balance sheet, which actually is an OPEX issue for us, as well as not being good for the productivity of the workforce, or not being good for the happiness and the well-being of our people. So we tried to understand that problem in a bit more detail and run specific surveys on that. And we found that some managers weren't as supportive as they should be as for people taking vacation. We found that some employees are just workaholic type nature and feel that they can't take the time off because their work's too important. We had some employees who felt that they didn't want to miss out on overtime if they took vacation, so were continuing to work. A whole variety of reasons. And I think when you've got a business issue like that has an impact on the people experience, or even the bottom line, as it does for us, then taking that issue and surveying it in more detail in a progressive way and making sure you respond to people and share what you found out is a particularly powerful way of problem solving. So so I'm really proud of the work that we've done on that, and we continue to run campaigns now on the segments that we identified of employees through that survey.
And tell me a little bit about that was a great body of work, and I know that many times when you're doing a kind of an off-cycle, or we call them subject-specific surveys, it can be a little overwhelming. And so from an HR team perspective, how did you coordinate with the team? I mean, that's a lot of markets to cover. Can you just share a little more about how you took the results and share markets?
Well, I think first of all, a real important point is that people should think about. You don't have to survey everyone every time you send a survey out. So taking random samples is a great way of getting some insight without having to roll out the annual machine, which takes so much project management preparation and so much workload on the communications and people teams to do effectively. So I mean, I think on this particular case, we got a good sample of people from different markets, different countries, different functions. We looked at where the vacation accrual problem was the worst, and we made sure we had a good sample in those areas. That really helped us. I think, secondly, I personalized it. So I personally like to send emails direct to employees, and I always copy, I always put in there my email address and my phone number, and I say I'm going to take personal accountability for maintaining the confidentiality of the data. And people can contact me personally if they want to. And, that then creates a little bit more rapport between the employees and the people team, gives them a bit more confidence that the survey is being taken seriously, and that they should feel absolutely free to express themselves and to tell us about their experiences. So yeah, I think taking samples of employees is a really good idea in these types of situations.
And just keeping with the employee focus just here for a minute, you introduced me to a concept that I love, and it's the you said we did concept. And we often talk to, and I mentioned earlier, making sure that you are able to show that to demonstrate to your executive leadership team that you've actually made change in marketing that effort. A lot of times, HR groups, do a tremendous amount for their organizations, and oftentimes, the marketing or the showing the results and getting that back out to employees can be a challenge. And I love this notion, this idea of you said we did that you've shared with me. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about how you have positioned change to your workforce, and a little more about this you said we did concept?
Yeah, you said we did is really about giving people confidence that we're acting on their feedback, so that they take the survey seriously, and so that they feel appreciated and listened to. So we've used various different communication channels, newsletters, or emails from CEOs or leaders in the business to use this concept. So it could be, you said that you didn't have the tools for the job, so we did a significant investment in extra technology to help you be successful and deliver better customer service. It could be, you said that our benefits program wasn't effective enough, so we've done some research and we have implemented an improved healthcare coverage for all of you from next year onwards. It's that kind of thing that we do. And importantly, you don't just do it once. I've used that before as a monthly communication, like I said, in a newsletter or on an intranet, just so that people have a steady flow of actions that the leadership team has taken in response to feedback. There is a little bit of internal PR to do there. Obviously,
when you say that, sorry to interrupt, when you say that, Dom, do you mean literally engaging your marketing team and getting marketing involved from an internal comms perspective?
Yeah, I've done that before, absolutely. Just as marketing people segment their customer base, we can segment our employee base. So if there is a particular area of the business that's especially disengaged, then yeah, you need to think about how you can deliver messages to them to show them that we're responding to their feedback. So yeah, there's a little element of internal PR. You know, I have to confess that I've been working on an HR project or initiative, and I've looked back at the feedback from employees, and I've found the feedback, and then I've written my "you said, we did," and it may not be that the feedback from the survey made us start this HR project. We were doing it anyway, but I was able to express that in that format back to employees.
Well, that is a perfect segue into my next question in terms of best practices and things that you've implemented. We oftentimes, obviously, our bread and butter is engagement surveying and collecting employee feedback. We often many times talk about how the engagement survey should just be one tool in your toolbox of engagement measurement techniques. Do you have any examples of things that do not relate to surveying? Because we are very conscious that we live in a hyper surveying world where there can be sensitivity to overwhelming employees. Have you used any different techniques that don't involve surveys in collecting employee feedback, and any examples that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, in this business, we're in a lot of different markets across the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. I've found in the last couple of years that the survey gives you the hint of an issue. Sometimes there's some verbatim comments to look at, which is insightful, but you don't really get to the core of the problem until you go and talk to the people yourself. So, I've worked in businesses where we've run focus groups led by HR or led by employee groups themselves without HR. But more recently, I've just been going and spending time with employees on the front line. The customer service teams in retail stores, in call centers. I go out with our field engineers as regularly as I can when I'm out in some of our markets, especially on our Caribbean islands. And I just get chatting to them, and I talk to them about why they're not taking their vacation, to go back to that example. And I've found a lot of insight from that. Or I find out, we get low scores on our reward section of the survey. Or what's the reason behind that? What do you think? And I find that following up on the themes that are cropping up in the survey with some face-to-face interaction and focus groups is especially powerful way of getting to the heart of the issue.
Excellent. Yeah, nothing replaces good old face-to-face conversations if you can do that. So it's great to hear that you're able to engage your workforce, particularly when you have such a sprawling group of employees across so many different markets. Any other topics? We often hear a lot about, best practices. We often hear a lot about, Glassdoor ratings and how to deal with those. Have you done any work around, Glassdoor or any other, facets of employee feedback that's coming into the HR organization?
Yeah, look, we're looking into that. For me, what I don't like is the single annual engagement survey and nothing else. Because like I said earlier, someone may feel one way when they fill out the survey, and 2 weeks later they feel completely different. I'm an advocate of the always listening model, and trying to get feedback from a number of different touch points throughout the year, whether that's social media, whether that's pulse surveys, whether it's being out on the ground and talking to employees and having focus groups. I think you've got to be thinking about feedback throughout the year and all the time, and getting it from a variety of different sources. Glassdoor interests me because I feel that some organizations are getting feedback from employees when they're leaving the organization, sometimes in a negative way, and therefore the survey or the feedback that's published online isn't necessarily representative of that organization and the culture. And then you have the challenge of candidates reading that feedback and making judgments on the organization. So the challenge for people in communication and marketing teams is, how do you respond to that? Do you go to your most engaged employees and say, do us a favor and give us a good score? I don't think you need to do that either. I think you've got to act with some integrity, and just show people that you're not scared of their feedback, and that you encourage them to share their views both internally and externally to the organization. Hopefully you'll get a more representative sample of feedback. So, I mean, that's something we're contemplating a lot at the moment, and thinking about how we Glassdoor is a super tool. I think it will become increasingly popular and used as the digital world continues to evolve. We look at the importance of TripAdvisor now when you book a hotel, I think employees in the workforce are going to continue to use Glassdoor to look at new companies.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, Dom. I think it's just part of the world we live in today, and that's a world where many times people want to make this a younger generation thing, but my view is that this is just how we interact with various aspects of our life, whether it's our employer and giving feedback on our employer, or a hotel, or Airbnb, or a restaurant in Yelp. There's this ability now to give feedback essentially real time in all aspects of our life. And that's cascaded into the business world and our jobs, where we spend arguably the most amount of our time. And that comes back to the notion that you've made, that your engagement measurement program really needs to be multifaceted. There should be an engagement survey. There should be a pulse survey component. I love the Virgin example of having an outlet where you can push feedback kind of on your terms as an employee. And the more we've seen the companies that are best at managing not just Glassdoor, but really their overarching employee feedback, employee experience program are the companies that offer these multi-channels to capture employee feedback. And the ones that aren't proactively looking at this are the ones that are scrambling to figure out what to do about the nasty Glassdoor comment that's been posted to their site. And so with that said, I think we're nearing the end of our time. Would love to get any kind of final thoughts that you from today's session.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think first of all, do these surveys. Don't be afraid if you're going through an organizational change. It's important that employees know that you care and that you want their feedback. And if you can do that in a regular rhythm, that's great. And if you can do it more than once in a year, I would highly recommend that. I think secondly, don't get caught in the trap of paralysis by analysis when your managers in particular ask for data chopped up into 100 different ways. You can get the general theme of what's going on in the organization fairly quickly from a good survey provider. I think thirdly, think about employee segmentation and internal PR in the same way that marketing and customer experience teams survey their customer base. We can do the same in people and communications teams, and think about where the most strategically important segments are, or where the segments are that you think you've got the best or the worst engagement, and really drill into that. And then, finally, I talk about this always listening concept, and finding different ways to get data, not just through a survey tool, but following up, spending time in focus groups, or just talking to frontline employees and getting the leadership team in front of frontline employees so you can hear what's happening as they talk to customers every day and and have their people experience in your company.
All great points. And, I can't thank you enough, Dom, for joining us today. This has been an amazing conversation, and you've really offered some insightful tips that I think our listeners can take away. That's about all the time we have for today. But for our audience, as a reminder, you can always access our website, getworkified.com, for more thought leadership, or to access other recorded webinars. But most of all, I want to again thank you, Dom, for joining us, and for everyone listening, for your time in listening to something that's very near and dear to our hearts, which is this evolving space that is employee engagement. So thanks again, Dom.
Thanks for having me.